Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, join me while I am going to make some doodling here. Doodling of AWS architecture. So if you're new here, this channel is where you'll get your AWS daily dose of AWS topics. And to all our returning viewers, thank you for joining me once again. It's great to have you back. So what I'm doing here is I'm just gonna play around with designing simple architectures. So here we're going to design a lambda architecture. So here we're going to put a lambda. We're going to put a lambda here. This is going to be the AWS lambda lambda, and we want to where are the extensions? We want to disable this. How do we delete this? Remove. Alright, so remove that. I don't want that. Yeah, I don't want that. Okay, so we have a lambda here. If we have a lambda, we might want to have an API gateway. Okay, so we put a lambda and we put an API gateway in front of our lambda. Gateway. And then we're going to open up ChatGPT. Put ChatGPT here and here. Cause I'm just a teenage dirtbag, baby. Listen to Iron Maiden. Alright. So, when in AWS, when do I use Amazon or AWS when naming the AWS service? Like, for example, when do I call API gateway Amazon API gateway or AWS API gateway? How about S3? Amazon S3 or AWS S3? How about EC2? Okay. When naming AWS services, the convention depends on how AWS officially brands them. Here's a general rule. Amazon is used for foundational services like storage, compute, and databases. AWS is used for services that are more platform-based or related to security, networking, and management. Okay, here are some specific examples. API gateway. Amazon API Gateway, S3, Amazon S3, EC2, Amazon EC2, RDS, Amazon RDS, DynamoDB is Amazon DynamoDB, CloudFront is Amazon CloudFront, Lambda is AWS Lambda. Okay, so takeaway, compute, storage, and database services use Amazon. Security, networking, and management services use AWS. Would you like more? Would you like a more comprehensive list for other services? So if it's compute, storage, database, database services, or Amazon, networking, and management services. So Lambda is also compute, right? Isn't Lambda a compute service? Yes, AWS Lambda is a compute service, but it follows a different naming convention because it is serverless computing service rather than an infrastructure-based compute service like Amazon EC2. Why is it AWS Lambda and not Amazon Lambda? AWS uses Amazon for foundational compute services that provides raw infrastructure like Amazon EC2. Okay, Amazon ECS. So ECS is foundation. How about EKS? Okay, Amazon is also EKS. Okay, for serverless, is it for serverless? But serverless is Dynamo. Is it Dynamo? Oh, see, Amazon DynamoDB. It's not AWS DynamoDB. While it managed services that abstracts infrastructure away, such as AWS Lambda. Yeah, Fargate because it's also serverless, right? But why DB is Amazon DynamoDB and not AWS DynamoDB? Great question. Amazon DynamoDB follows the Amazon naming convention even though it is fully managed NoSQL database service. The reason lies in how AWS categorizes its services. Why Amazon DynamoDB and not AWS DynamoDB? AWS typically uses Amazon for core foundational services that relate to storage, compute, and databases. DynamoDB falls under the database category alongside services like RDS, Aurora, Redshift, Elasticache. These are all primary data storage services since they use the Amazon branding. Why aren't other managed services using Amazon? While DynamoDB is fully managed, it is still classified as a database service, much like Amazon RDS. Meanwhile, services that are more platform oriented or abstracted infrastructure, like AWS Lambda or AWS Glue, use AWS. Rule of thumb databases and storage services use Amazon. Amazon S3. Would you like? Okay, so we don't. Sometimes we can't trust um, ChatGPT, so we will have a second opinion from DeepSeek. Okay, so copy that and then put that to DeepSeek. What will be DeepSeek's answer? So he was thinking, okay, so I need to figure out when to use Amazon versus AWS when naming AWS services. Let me start by recalling the services I know. For example, there's S3, EC2, API Gateway. Sometimes I see them referred to as Amazon S3 or AWS Lambda. But why that difference? First, maybe I should check some official AWS documentation. Let me think. I remember that some services are prefixed with Amazon and others with AWS, like Amazon S3 versus AWS CloudFormation. What's the pattern here? Maybe it's based on the type of service. For instance, infrastructure services like EC2, S3 are Amazon, while management tools like CloudFormation or Lambda are AWS. Wait, Lambda is a compute service, but it's called AWS Lambda. Hmm, that doesn't fit. Maybe it's not about the service type. Alternatively, maybe it's the age of the service. Older services use Amazon. Few newer ones use AWS. S3 and EC2 are older, so they're Amazon. Services like Lambda, CloudFormation are newer, so AWS. But is that accurate? I'm not sure. Let me think of more examples. Amazon RDS, Relational Database Service, is another older service. No, so Amazon. AWS Step Functions is a newer orchestration service. That seems to fit. But then again, there's AWS Elastic Beanstalk, which is also older. Wait, Elastic Beanstalk might be from 2011, which is around the same time as some other services. Maybe the naming isn't strictly based on age. Another angle, marketing. Maybe Amazon is used for core infrastructure services and AWS for higher level or managed services, but then AWS Fargate is a compute service which is core but uses AWS. This is confusing. Wait, maybe the official branding guidelines from AWS can clarify. I recall that AWS has specific branding rules. Let me try to remember or reconstruct them. From what I've read before, AWS services are categorized into two main groups: those that are part of the core infrastructure, like compute storage, use Amazon, and those that are tools, management, or auxiliary services use AWS. So, for example, compute, Amazon EC2, storage, Amazon S3, database, Amazon RDS, management, AWS CloudFormation, compute, serverless, AWS Lambda, networking, Amazon VPC, security, AWS IAM. That seems to make sense. Core services get Amazon, while tools, management, and some newer services get AWS. But wait, IAM is AWS IAM, which is security. Maybe security services are under AWS, or maybe not. Let me check another service. Amazon Guard Duty is a security service, but it's Amazon. So that theory might not hold. Alternatively, maybe it's about the level of abstraction. Lower level services close to infrastructure are Amazon. Higher level, more abstracted, are AWS. For example, EC2. Infrastructure as service is Amazon. Lambda serverless are abstract is AWS. Similarly, S3 storage is Amazon, but AWS backup is a management tool. That might fit. But then Amazon DynamoDB is a database service, platform as a service, which is Amazon. So maybe databases under Amazon regardless. AWS RDS is also a managed database service, but called Amazon RDS. Wait, no, RDS is Amazon RDS. So databases under Amazon, huh? Then AWS has services like AWS Database Management Service. So that's a tool, hence AWS. How long is this, man? Oh man. Okay, so let's go to his um, final answer. When naming AWS services, the prefix Amazon and AWS are used based on historical convention and branding guidelines. Here's a breakdown to help clarify. Amazon prefix, typically used for core infrastructure services, compute, storage, database, networking. Example, blah 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 blah. AWS prefix often used for higher level tools, managed services or platform features, managed security, service, serverless, etc. Lambda, blah 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 blah. Okay, observation, no strict rules. Some services don't follow the pattern. Branding over logic. The distinction often reflect how AWS initially branded the service rather than a functional category. To verify, always check the official documentation or marketing material for the correct name. For example, Amazon S3 versus AWS S3. Official is Amazon S3. AWS EC2 versus Amazon EC2. Official is Amazon EC2. Okay, so yeah, the marketing people here are to be blamed. Okay, so cool. They don't have a correct guideline, so we'll always have to check the documentation if we want to prefix it with Lambda or with Amazon or AWS. Okay, so here Amazon API Gateway and AWS Lambda. We don't have, as what we've observed earlier, we don't have uh, a rule on when to use um, the correct prefix. So next is we're going to use the DynamoDB. So DynamoDB, as we've discovered earlier, DynamoDB is Amazon DynamoDB. So even if this is serverless, this is still called Amazon DynamoDB. Okay, so next is we want to have a bucket policy. Where are the AWS policy? Can we use this as policy? Okay, so this is a policy. So bucket policy for S3. We want to use S3 simple storage service, and there's a bucket policy, and then we're going to put a CloudFront. We want to put a CloudFront here, and in our DynamoDB we also have a DAX. What is the is this a DAX here, or is there other logo or icon for DAX? DynamoDB DAX. DynamoDB. Okay, so that's DynamoDB DAX. Okay, so you will have like in your CloudFront, you want to put a, what is the between your CloudFront and your S3, you want to put the origin access control. S3, or like that. Okay, so origin access control. Origin access control, and then there's your bucket policy here. Can you change the color? Can you change the color of this one to this? Okay, bucket policy, CloudFront. CloudFront. Your client is going to access CloudFront. Interaction with edge location. Oops. Oops. Edge location here, and then cloud formation here. CloudFront, Amazon. CloudFront. Distribution. Bucket policy. This is going to have a REST API. Okay, gateway. This invokes a Lambda. Then Lambda is also going to respond to the API gateway. Then Lambda will query to docs. And then docs is going to this is DynamoDB docs. Thanks. Okay. Docs caching layer. Caching layer goes to docs to DynamoDB. And this is gonna query read data from a cache, DynamoDB cache, and sending email, SDK to send email, stream data. Okay, so you're going to stream. What is the DynamoDB stream? This is the DynamoDB stream. Stream. This is the DynamoDB stream. DynamoDB stream. It will invoke a lambda. Then lambda sends an email. SES. Okay, so this is the Amazon SES. It has a SDK to send email. So IAM rule. Okay, that's it. Client wants to access Lambda, so it comes from it access via API gateway, then retrieve from caching. DynamoDB strips data here. Then it can triggers a Lambda. Evokes Lambda to send an email. Okay, so we can digest this. Chew it properly before you swallow it, kids. You should chew. Okay, chew this information. What it does is it's yeah, this is a very simple one. For accessing S3 website, it is have a bucket policy, and then it has an origin access so that your S3 is not open to public. It's only open to CloudFront. CloudFront is the one facing your client. and your APIs also um, how can we make a AWS Lambda private and only accessible via API? Let's check for ChatGPT. How to make Lambda only accessible via API gateway. Is it security group? To make an AWS Lambda function accessible only via API gateway, follow these steps. Okay, so you kids can see this properly. Okay, so this is our Lambda and this is our API gateway. So to make your AWS Lambda function accessible only via API gateway, follow these steps. Number 1, remove direct invocation permissions. By default, AWS Lambda functions can be invoked directly if you know their ARN. To restrict access, ensure that no IAM user rule or AWS service except AWS API gateway has Lambda invoke function permission. Modify the function's resource-based policy to allow only API gateway. Okay, so you can modify the resource policy in API gateway. So like this, your policy, a resource policy in your API gateway, so that it will not be accessible by other services other than API gateway. And number 2, create an API gateway and link it to Lambda. Okay, we know how to do this. Restrict Lambda invocation to API gateway only. Open your Lambda function in the API console, navigate to permission, edit the resource. Yeah, I think this is what was defined on top. Okay, so deny all principal to this resource and allow only the API gateway with ARN to this resource. Replace a US East 1 with your region. Replace one in your blah blah blah. Okay, enable IAM authorization optional. Okay, so that's it. If you don't want your Lambda to be accessible from other services or from the web, revoke all access and only to API gateway via the resource-based policy. Alright, so that's it, kids. I hope you like it, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and super thanks button, and buy some teas. And that's it, kids. Bye, see you on the next video. Bye bye bye.